All right. Now let's do some fan questions.
How you doing, Chael? In the last Darren Till fight, he talked about his mental health. He talked about how he almost faked the injury because he was so scared to get back in there. Can you talk about mental health in fighters? Can you talk about a time that maybe you almost faked the injury?
Okay, so I got to tell you, I feel that mental health is a little bit of a dramatic way to say it. And the only reason I push back on that is whenever we're talking about mental health in colloquial terms, we're generally talking about an ailment that needs corrected or fixed. In Darren Till's case, he was more just talking about the psychology from an honest and truthful standpoint. And if other guys were open and honest, they would go, yeah, I feel that same thing too. And I always love the story. George St-Pierre and David Loiseau. St-Pierre, who went on to become a world champion, Loiseau, who went to fight for a world championship. All right, two absolute studs with great careers, were also teammates. And they debuted on the same card. And it was a small regional show. I would trust it was somewhere in Canada. But when they were in the back, they both made each other a deal. Like, hey, I'm your friend, you're my friend, I'm your teammate, you're my teammate. No matter what I say or how tonight goes, never let me sign up for another one of these events. Promise me. And the other one goes, okay, I promise I'll never let you do it again as long as you also make me the same. Don't let me do this again. Now, that was just a real story. And when you ask if I've ever been in Till's spot, where I think he said, suggesting of faking an injury to get out. No, not that specifically, but I do understand what he's talking about. It's a unique emotion, and there's certain times in the sport when it's your turn. You are up next. Oh, by the way, you're not ready. And whatever ready is, or however you would define it, you're just not in that frame of mind. You just don't want to walk through the curtain, but they just played your song, and they just pulled the curtain back and told you to go. And I think that's what Till was speaking to. And I don't know of any athlete who's ever not felt that. All he was doing there was being open and honest and identifying. And you'll have, it doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what fighter. Mike Tyson has come out and spoke about this. Mike walks to the ring. He looks cold as ice. He looks focused as can be. No expression on his face, his beady little eyes staring at his opponent. But Mike, after he retired, came out, he talked about, man, I was scared to death in the back. I used to throw up in the back. I would be so worked up with anxiety, I would throw up in the back. There was a night that BJ Penn fought, and I believe it was his fight with Nick Diaz. But as BJ walks to the ring, he has tears coming down his face. Everybody's going, what the hell's this all about? Well, it was just one of those emotions, and he wasn't able to control it, and it came out, and BJ's way of dealing with it that specific night was to just let it happen. Tears in his eyes as he's walking to the ring. He's horrified. But these are very real things, and Darren Till spoke about it. And my only correction to you was just the mental health, only because that has a negative connotation. Look, Darren Till was doing something powerful there. The only power that a threat or a fear has over you is whatever your reaction to that threat or that fear is. So Darren Till, instead of bottling it up, he just told the world about it. And I can assure you, through him doing that, it lessened the power that anxiety will have over him in the future.
Chael, people go to bat justifying a Conor and Khabib rematch. But Conor was beat in all rounds, including the third. And eventually he was finished. And even Dana, his wife, has tried to justify this rematch, yet he completely dismissed Nate Diaz's request for a rematch with Jorge. So my question to you is, who is more deserving of a rematch? Conor with Khabib or Nate with Jorge?
Well, that's a fair point that you make. I will tell you this. So whenever you talk about deserving, a lot of times I do get lost. Look, I don't fully know how to identify deserving as it relates to the business, the fight business. And the four names that you just mentioned are extremely highly paid athletes. So if you are talking about from a business standpoint, Khabib and Conor, does that work? Does that sell out? Does that make everybody stop what they're doing and tune in for that? Yes, it absolutely does. If you're trying to make an argument that the first fight was not overly competitive, Conor stopped doing the sport, Khabib stayed busy, which means at least logically that Conor isn't as good as he was the night he was in there and got dominated, and Khabib in theory should be better. I will listen and I hear you. I do think the story plays better had the roles reversed. Had Khabib, for whatever reason, been put on ice. And Conor got 2 or 3 more training camps and 2 or 3 more competitions in. I hear you on that. But to deny Conor, who is a 3-time world champion, people always forget about the interim title with him. I don't know why. They recognize the featherweight, they recognize the lightweight. He's actually won 3 world championships. To dismiss him and act as though, competitively speaking, he doesn't deserve an opportunity, I think is a little bit short-sighted. I don't know that that's fair. Now, when you look at Masvidal and Nate, the competitor in Nate is coming out and saying, hey, I want that one back. I should have. I was guaranteed, I was promised, I had a contract for 2 more rounds unless I get knocked out or I tap out. This is his argument. I hear what you're saying on that, but now you still do have a business side. There was something special that happened that night. The BMF title has never happened before and is said to never happen again. I mean, just that one piece of it was special. Madison Square Garden brings in something special. The supporting cast that jerked the curtain all the way from the undercard to the main card before him was special. Nobody was assigned that night that had a lower world ranking than 15. I mean, it was an incredible night. The flying knee record-setting knockout that Masvidal came into this with over Askren. The return of Nate Diaz, who happens to call out Masvidal, who happens to be in the second row, who happens to stand up and accept. I mean, there was a lot of things business-wise that came into play that will not be on the table if they did it again. Does that mean he doesn't deserve to go out and compete with who he wants to compete with? No, I won't go that far. But when we are discussing the word deserve, I feel that we are now applying our own meaning to it, and we are talking about what people want to see. I don't suggest for you that people don't want to see Masvidal and Diaz fight again. I only suggest for you it will take a level of creativity to try to create and reenact the same night that we had the first time, which I think you could at least agree was special.
Hey, Chael. Ariel and Nate recently sat down in Madison Square Garden, and the full interview conversation is up on ESPN. And I saw Nate talk about retirement and how he's never going to retire, and people that do say they retire are pretty much just trying to bait out, pity from the audience so they can say oh, please come back, please come back. How do you feel about that? Do you feel the same way? Were you kind of expecting the audience to say the same thing to you?
Well, I think Nate really is right in a broad stroke. Obviously, there's certain guys that they come to a certain time or they have an injury, or there is a number of reasons why guys want and elect or by default just realize it's time to retire. But I have seen that as well to the point of nausea, what Nate's talking about, where a guy comes out and says it, but it's really just his way of looking for a compliment. Oh, you can still do it. Oh boy, please don't go. You got so many more great ones out there. I've seen that too. So I concede to Nate's point on that. I've heard Nate in other interviews, and he didn't say it in the one you're referencing, but in other interviews, he's talked about, I will never retire, but then he qualified that with the following statement by saying, I will always be a martial artist. And I may not always be competing, but I will always be a martial artist. I will be coaching. I will be giving back. I will be handing my knowledge to the next group of people, the same as my coaches who came before me, gained experience and knowledge and passed it to me. So perhaps it's a combination of the interview you saw and some ones that I can recall hearing from Nate, but I think it's very fair. If he says he doesn't ever, and isn't ever going to retire, he's going to just stay a martial artist, I think there's an honor in that, and we can respect it.
Hey, Chael, I just wanted to get your opinion on something. I've been making a comment within the gym, and I've been getting a lot of hate for it, that I believe that within that 155-pound division, that if Tony does not beat Khabib, then I feel like Conor McGregor is going to be one of the only guys to be able to beat him. And one of the reasons why I say that is I felt like he did a fairly decent job at stuffing some of the takedowns, and I would like to see him be a little bit more offensive. So I just want to get your opinion. Is that really an outrageous comment? And also, I just want to say that if I ever do make it to the UFC, Chael, I want you in my corner, okay?
I will look forward to walking you to the ring. And I will tell you this, your eyes are not deceiving you. I saw the same thing when I saw Conor fight Khabib. I saw a lot more competitive match than most people remember. And I did see Khabib win every round but one, and I did see Khabib in absolutely dominating positions, and I did see Khabib strangle him and force him to tap out. I saw all of those things, but I also saw some really good moments by Conor. I saw Conor frustrating Khabib. If you want to go back and rewatch that match, just go watch the first minute. In the very first minute, Khabib changes, he gets close enough, he changes elevation. Khabib shows that he can deal with some of the strikes and timing and speed of Conor McGregor. He gets a hold of the leg, his head's on the outside, but he has a very hard time finishing. If you just go watch that one exchange, they're right in the center of the octagon. There is nobody around, there's no fence for obstruction. This is just pure, clean, in the open, straight up wrestling with two fresh guys who don't even have a sweat going yet. And Khabib really struggled. Conor did a really good job in that position. And if Conor sits down with a wrestling coach and relooks at that same position, there was changes that he could make, and he never would have gone down from that spot. There was a lot of stuff he chose to lock in the crotch. There's stuff that he could have done that's more advanced by coming over the top, securing ankles, using his free leg to kick off. I'll remind you, Khabib only had a hold of one leg. It's what we call a head to the outside single or a high crotch in the world of wrestling. He was not in on a double. Conor at one point was almost doing the splits. I mean, he was showing real athleticism. His technique in how to defend that position was not textbook. I will not give him a nod that it was A+. As far as him showing what a good athlete he was and that he was going to scramble and fight through a precarious position, Conor did a great job. I saw what you saw. And I will remind you, the same with Conor in that fight, but anybody that ever has to face Khabib ever or has faced Khabib, if you can keep your back off the fence, your chances of not ever being taken down by Khabib and mauled go up exponentially. Exponentially. Let's try that again. But you see what I'm saying? Khabib doesn't wrestle in the open. He wrestles up against the fence. It's a harder way to wrestle. In many ways, Khabib deserves even more credit to be able to get takedowns from a tougher position. But it's still a fair analysis by me that if you could keep him in the open, keep that fence out of the equation, your chances do go up. And that first fight, Conor versus Khabib, was a lot more competitive than people choose to remember. I agree with you.
Hey, Chael, I got a question for you. I haven't heard a lot of people discussing Anthony Pettis. We're talking about a guy here who was on the Wheaties box as UFC champion, and over the past 4 years, his record is 4-7. Do you think Pettis can turn it around, and who is he next to fight? Thank you.
Well, if you go look at that 4-7, you got to look a little bit closer than just the number. Don't forget, Pettis has covered a spread and changed weight classes. If you also look at those fights, Pettis is never lower than a co-main event. So he's fighting some of the absolute top guys in the world. And by the way, just getting those 4 was no easy task. Many other athletes would be 0-11 as opposed to 4-7. So I think Pettis has had some very great moments. But I think he's had some very hard fights. I mean, I think a little bit of slack can be thrown in there. The Nate Diaz fight was no easy fight, particularly at 170 pounds, particularly in Nate's backyard, just to go back to Pettis' most recent. You want to go back a little bit further, I mean, he's locked in there with Tony Ferguson. And by the way, what was one hell of a good fight? Ends up with a cut, doctor stoppage, fair game, nobody's crying foul ball. But if you do go look at that 4-7 record and you go look at who he fought, where he fought them, and what weight classes he was fighting them in, I think you're going to have a little bit more appreciation to the one-sided record of Anthony Pettis.
Hey, Chael. A lot of us know you as one of the best MMA personalities in the game, but I was wondering, when you're not making videos and working events, what is it you like to do?
Well, I'll tell you what I don't like to do. I hate the idea of a day off. Nothing. I check my calendar on my phone every night when I go to bed. I never know what I have to do the next day. Sometimes I got to be on an airplane. I got to pack a bag and be out of town. But I don't even know it till the night before. Literally, I will finish one day, check my calendar, see what's up tomorrow, set my alarm clock based on that. So it's kind of day to day, but I will tell you, if there's ever a time where I go, oh gosh, it would be if there was nothing to do the next day. If I didn't have something scheduled and I didn't have a few places to be. I usually put my bigger hobbies. I like movies, and I fancy myself as a movie critic. I not only like to see a movie, I then like to give an assessment of the movie. So as much as I hate a day off, I do enjoy relaxing within a day. And I would tell you movies and usually food is a big deal at my house. So my wife and I will kind of plan our whole day and text each other a couple times through the day based on what we're going to do for dinner that night.
Uncle Chael, you're the best. I got an opinion. I want to hear your take on this. I think that Conor, Tony, and Khabib, I think are all a slight tier above the rest of the field at 155. Not that Gaethje or Poirier or any of those guys couldn't pull an upset. I'm sure they could. But I think that Conor is always going to have trouble with Khabib. I think it's a bad style matchup. I think Khabib's wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu was ground and pound. Just isn't good for Conor. I think he's going to, always give him problems. I think it'll be hard for Conor to pull that off. However, I think that Tony, will beat Khabib. I think Tony's going to let him take him down in the center of the octagon, start throwing elbows. I think Tony's pace and his conditioning is a little bit better than Khabib's. I think we're going to see that in the later rounds. And, Tony's also a national champ at wrestling, so I'm sure he could somewhat hold his own in the wrestling department. But I think that Conor, will beat Tony due to the fact that Tony gets hit a lot. And I think McGregor is very accurate and he's very powerful. I think that's going to run into some problems for Tony. I think he could go out early. I want to know what your opinion is on this. Thank you.
Well, I look forward to seeing how all of that plays out. And I kind of have like a dark-seated hope that we do get exactly what you described, because round robins are fun. Whenever you get 3 guys, and you could even make it as many as 4, but every which way you do it, you get a different outcome, right? Based on who runs into who is going to stop this guy, but this guy can beat all. It starts to get really fun. And I also think that there is a possibility of that. And I got to tell you guys, these questions are taken at random. But I have noticed there's a lot of talk on Conor McGregor today. I'm just hearing that name coming more and more. And I think we're going to see that as a pending fight with he and Cowboy starts to materialize. But you can't help but talk about Conor without bringing up Khabib. You can't help but talk about Khabib without mentioning the fact that, hey, that should be Tony Ferguson. And it seems as though all the Tony and Khabib talk has died. Do you guys remember even before Khabib's last fight with Poirier? Khabib was out there telling everybody, after I get done with Poirier, I go into Tony. If they offer me Conor, I go fight Tony. If they tell me they'll pay me more money to fight Conor, I go fight Tony. I mean, Khabib was a sport. And he fully acknowledged how the rankings went, and he fully acknowledged that Tony Ferguson has done enough and gets the opportunity. Tony was pretty vocal. I mean, Tony was coming out, calling him, from is tiramisu? Is that when Tony says tiramisu, is he talking about Khabib and taking his shots at him and saying, man, I had better get this? And Tony was laying out his case, and all of a sudden that's just completely gone silent, which tells me, I mean, the silence is deafening at times. And I do feel that in this case, that fight is done. That fight's done, locked up, venue, contracts, the whole bit. But guys, don't say anything. We got some other big matches coming up, and we'll roll this out when we're ready. And that may not even be until the pay-per-view on December 14th. We'll see how all of that goes. But there has been an odd silence. In unison, I might add, the same day that Khabib quit talking about Tony was the same day Tony quit talking about Khabib. Great. Coincidence? I don't think so. A clue? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I just solved it for you. But it also does bring in Conor. Look, if Conor comes back and gets the jump on Cowboy, is Conor looking to just do fights? Even if they're big fights and they're main event fights and they're marquee fights, is that what he's looking to do? I don't think so. I think he's looking to climb that mountain one more time. I think that he fully is aware that that is probably Khabib, but I think he's also aware that there's a possibility that it's Tony. And I think as fans, let's just say that plays out. Let's say that Tony beats Khabib, and then Conor can come in and get over on Tony, just by example. So now he draws back into Khabib, and let's say Khabib gets over on Conor. Well, then what do you do with Tony? But you could have a storyline and a lot of fun for years based off of that. Then if you could break a guy like Poirier back in, get Justin Gaethje into the mix, maybe Cerrone ruins the party for everybody in mid-January, but these are all things that we can look forward to. You know, I can just remember my most fun time being a boxing fan. I was a little kid, but you had the real four horsemen. Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Roberto Duran. And these guys could never figure it out. They're all beating one another. I mean, even when you look back and you look at the record and try to figure out who was best, I mean, it's like arguing Batman versus Superman. It was so open for interpretation, and there was enough evidence that you could make a claim of any one of those four, but then offer actual fight results as to why you've come to that opinion. It was unclear, but it was fun. And I think that your topic and the way you've laid it out does make things fun.
Thanks for liking and subscribing to the bad guy of YouTube. Chael Sonnen, he's a-coming, breaking down your fighting news. Better subscribe to the bad guy right here on YouTube. Bringing new content every single day. The stories of fighters, a true insider with his own special way. He's Chael Sonnen.